I mean, it's all
Going
up to you,
live. Hello and good morning and welcome to another Jump Advisory recruitment discussion. As always, if you can hear me, please put the obligatory note in the chat box in the questions section to say that you can hear me. If you don't want to hear us, just switch off. This week, we have no guest. It's just the four of us. But what a discussion that we have lined up for us. If we go back to the 3rd of February, wow, the 3rd of February, it seems such a long time ago. Our first guest was Neil Carberry. And at that time, he was talking about what was happening in the marketplace, what was going on in the recruitment marketplace. And we started to look at how some of our assets in our business could help us drive things forward. What Neil was talking about has certainly come to fruition. The temp market is flying. The perm market is certainly picking up at a great rate of knots. And most of the agencies that I'm speaking to are having a really good time. So if we think we started that conversation off with Endure the COVID Marathon with Jamie Shires talking about that positive well-being and how it could elevate your performance. We then had the whole all the way on discussing about how great feedback drives performance. Wendy McDougall from Firefish demonstrated how data can help improve your consultant's performance, while Kevin Flower from Mercury XRM flipped that talk and had the discussion about how it can help you build your client base. And then Mac Me came on from MSI and talked about how data can help influence your market and take you from being a suspect to be a prospect. We then had the great Simon Blosh on from JMW talking about the legal side of things and how employment law is changing, so how it will affect your attraction and retention and obviously your leavers. That was a pretty lively discussion. And then last week we had the lovely Lisa Kramer on from Kruth talking about hybrid working and how healthy teams will prosper. So you keep asking us what we would do. And we keep covering an amount of information and giving an immense amount of sort of information back to you. But the question always keeps coming back, what would we implement and how do we implement it? So what we thought this week would do, we'd take those questions and we would start to show what we would implement from the data we've had from the last 6 or 7 weeks and what we would do. So as always, keep asking questions. I did ask for a load of questions to post in and quite a lot of people have posted questions in. We'll interlace those questions into the answers. So what I'd like to do is start off by saying, guys, let's make this a lively debate. So without further ado, Mr. Sharp, who's live from client site. That's not his usual sort of bedroom sort of activity.
He looks very smart today, doesn't he? He's got his nice shirt on. He's looking very, very handsome.
And he's combed his hair as well for a change. But for all the information that we've gathered, Mr. Sharp, what's the first thing that you would implement first and why?
Well, the first thing I'd do is put a lock on my door because the fact that you know something about my bedroom worries me enormously. But it's quite interesting, all these luxurious places popping up on the chat. And I'm in what's called Middle Earth, otherwise known as Yorkshire today. So not too far from Howard. It's a great question. I think the bit for me that I think is really imperative, we talk about building client relationships and getting in front of clients, whether it be physically or virtually. That for me has got to be the number one thing that I would do. So it's all about understanding where your clients are at, where they're at on the client life cycle, how you get the clients from one stage to the next. And I think we talked about things like market data with Matt, me, and Neil Carberry. I think there is a massive opportunity, and I say this because I know some of my clients are doing it. They're taking really good data, market data, and they're using that as a means to get meetings with the clients, and they're getting in front of the clients and starting to have conversations about what's going on within the labour market, what's happening from a skills perspective, and what's happening in relation to that individual client and what the competitors are doing in the local area and region. And I think as an SME provider, I think there is a massive opportunity to use that and get in front of your clients. It elevates the conversation, it moves the client relationship on, and you'll naturally pick work up by having those conversations. That's my number one for me, Howard.
So one of the questions we've got asked was, how do you motivate your guys to speak to everyone, i.e. candidates and clients alike? Is that one of the things that you would say that gives you a great opportunity to speak to clients and develop your client and candidate relationships?
Yeah, absolutely. Because I think if you speak to your speak to your candidates, then you get some really good data that you can then drop into these slide decks. But it's such an easy conversation if you talk to your client to say, can I come and share some market data and some market information with you? Can I share some thought leadership? Can I share what's going on in the world of recruitment and what it will look like in 3, 4, 5 years' time? It's a different conversation. And for the consultants, it just motivates them because they're not picking the phone up all the time saying, can I have a vacancy, or can you tell me what your resource plan is for this year and next year? They're having a completely different conversation. It's not for every consultant, so you've got to be confident and you've got to know the market to some degree, but it's just a completely different conversation. And it doesn't matter whether you're in IT, whether you're in driving, whether you're doing commercial or industrial or hospitality. All those clients in all those sectors that I work with are all using this, and they're getting a really good traction and hit rate with clients.
So it's a really interesting sort of view when you look at it in that way. And I think when we sort of finished, all four of us talking about what we would implement and what's the, would have the sort of the first thing we do, it'd be interesting when we start to intertwine that with the second question and some of the attendees' questions as well. Dave, how's your broadband this week? Are we going to have the Norman Collier of always, or are you going to be clear and concise as you should be and always usually are? Mr. Pye, what's the first thing that you would implement and why?
The first thing is to find a modern version of Norman Collier so that I can understand what you're talking about. So I've never heard of the guy. I need some. I'll take Michael McIntyre. Or,
Google's a great thing, Dave. You might not have heard of that either.
I think one of the things that's been fascinating about doing these series of online discussions is the guests that we have and the impact they have on us as a team. So I'm sitting there as a host, if you like, and I'm frantically writing notes from all the different guests that we have. And one of the ones that impacted me the most was Jamie Shears. Jamie came on, 5-6 weeks ago to talk about mental health. And it took me back to that very famous quote of Peter Drucker, the great management guru from the States from years ago. And his quote was, culture eats strategy for breakfast. And it's that whole thing of you can have the best strategy in the world, but if you're not looking after your people, then it's all going to dissipate. Clearly, there's a lot more to it than that. However, what Jamie was saying is, where is your motivation? And I think the first thing that I would do, the thing that's I'd implement, is have significant conversations with your people. And don't assume that because April the 12th is on the horizon and May the 17th is on the horizon and the working from home and the working in the office may change, that everybody is ready to do what you need them to do to make your business successful. Because in my experience in conversations with people over the past 4 or 5 weeks, there's quite a lot of nervousness out there about what does this next phase look like. Are we out of it? Are we not? What are clients going to do? There certainly seems to be a lot of appetite for growth. There are more requirements coming in. There's more services being offered. Absolutely. But are your people ready to have those conversations? And so I would implement having conversations with your people. And Jamie's talk and Jamie's presentation was all about finding out their fears versus their desires. What do they really want to do and what are they really fearful for? And if I were a business leader now, I'd be taking that time to have individual conversations, literally getting under the skin of your people, finding out where they are. And then when you find out where they are, you can begin to implement some of the other many good things that we've learned about in the last few weeks.
So one of the questions that have come in again, which came from Colin, was, I have a small team of experienced recruiters and I'd like to agree minimum activity levels and how to get buy-in on the way through. Now, minimum activity levels is one thing, but what you're talking about there is about getting the buy-in and understanding your people, because they'll all be on a different sort of level of, if 0 from 1 to 10, 10 being extremely ready to go and naught being, yeah, I've got my head still buried in the sand quite a much. What you're saying is having those conversations, you'll be able to start to gauge where people are, and then you'll be able to start to motivate them and drive them forward, irrespective of their level of experience.
Yeah, and to Colin's point, I think it's an excellent idea to have those minimum levels, but it may be that those minimum levels are different for each person. The way that we were before the pandemic, everybody had the same targets for the most part. There were generalizations, but for the most part, everybody had the same target. It could be that the way to build a successful business and to implement some of these strategies is that actually the minimum level changes depending on who you're talking to and depending on where they are and how they're coming out of what we've just been through. Some may want something much more significant than you're even thinking of, others much less.
Okay, so an interesting point, and from there to sort of drive that back into the team and back into the people point of view. Paul, we were talking this before, sort of the other guys got on air this morning a little bit. What's your understanding, Paul? What's the first thing that you would implement and why?
Well, I just want to sort of reinforce, I think, the points that Dave was making. For me, it really is about now making sure that you're very close to your own people. I mean, we listened to Neil Carberry, who was great on our webinars about 6-7 weeks back, and he talked about the mini boom. He talked about the fact that despite unemployment reaching probably 7.5%, he reminded us that the percentage of unemployment will still be less than we experienced after the banking crisis at the end of the last decade, which actually I'd forgotten about, to be blunt. It was one of those moments when I thought, you know what, he's right about this. In fact, it's probably not going to be as bad as we've already experienced. And he said that businesses are storing money. They've not been investing. They're about to start reinvesting. There's going to be a lot of activity in the market, mergers and acquisitions, companies now moving forward very, very swiftly to try to regain profits that have been lost over the last 12 months. He was very optimistic, and he also talked about the fact that private individuals who have not been able to spend money have also been saving, and that money will start to get pumped into the economy too. It was a very upbeat conversation. It reminded me of the call of what we've been saying for the last 12 months, which is that mini boom is coming. So where do I want to be? What's going to be the most important thing for me right now as a business owner? It's making sure that my people are absolutely ready to go. This is back to Dave's point. Where are their heads at the moment? I talk constantly to clients and their people. I had a conversation yesterday with a group of guys working for a fintech business in London, all of whom are desperately keen to get back into the office and see their friends and start working together again as a unified team. But, there are one or two comments in there, and I noticed them yesterday from people feeling slightly ill at ease about traveling into work, for example, being close to other people. Some of them, at least one of those guys I spoke to yesterday, is living on his own. And, if I'm a business owner right now, I'm going to be concerned that the people that work with me are okay, that they're in a good place from a mental well-being perspective. And I think Dave's point is absolutely spot on. We obviously need to now make that charge forward, to take advantage, get in front of the curve for the mini boom that people are predicting. Bank of England, our own Neil Carberry, and what we've been saying. But you can't achieve that unless you're absolutely sure that your people are in a good space, a good headspace. So I think Dave's absolutely right about that. It'd be the very first thing I would do. And I'm going to pick up on the point about setting targets. I think that's a really good point. And again, I've had similar conversations with several clients recently about realigning targets. And I think that, goals that we had pre-COVID are no longer valid. So the question is, what is valid? Can you set at this moment a 12-month target? I would argue that if it was me, I would probably be looking to set much shorter term targets, 3 months, 6 months, because I think it's a difficult thing to predict. If you're going to put me on the spot, I would say that the first 6 months, the next 6 months are likely to be a gradual growth, whereas I would actually predict that the next 6 months after that, we will see boom So I think that we'll see fantastic performance from the economy. We'll see our consultants really starting to establish themselves and do very well. But would I make a prediction for 12 months ahead right now? Difficult. So probably hedge my bets, give people 3-6 month targets to go after. So I think it's all about people. To answer the question, it's all about our people. Get close to them, Dave's right, one-to-ones as well as group conversations. There's going to be an opportunity very soon to meet with them one-on-one. If you've not already done that, that would be where I would start. That'd be my absolute priority.
So it's quite interesting. We're all sort of driving back down towards our people and what our people do. And what you mentioned there, Paul, because not everybody's got a long as memory as you with regard to what's gone on in the past. But if you start to think of that 2008, it was 8.5, I think, the unemployment rate. If you went back into the early 90s, it was over 10%.
Yeah.
We still haven't got over towards that 7% mark, which they first predicted from there. So that unemployment level is driving down. But the big difference is what they're talking about is, rather than being a hockey stick, nice gradual recovery as it was in 2008, they're talking about the bathtub recovery, aren't they, where it dropped quickly, bottomed out quickly, and then it'll come back really quickly. So if I look at what I was sort of thinking about, what I would sort of implement first, I took a lot from last week's session with Lisa regarding, healthy teams will be the teams that prosper. And that sort of led me to sort of think about what everybody else had sort of gone through, whether that be from Wendy from Firefish or Kevin from Mercury. It drove back to the one that Heather Solway came back, was about performance evaluation and how that can drive feedback. And I think there's an opportunity as all our staff, either if they're coming back from furlough or if they're back in the office, is actually having a genuine proper performance review on what they're doing, finding out their strengths, finding their gaps in their knowledge, putting in training sessions to recover those things, to make sure their strengths get stronger and their gaps are bridged. And we work on that, because I think, as you rightly say, Paul, that boom is coming, and we've got to get fit and healthy again for that boom. And I think the mental awareness of everybody now in the company, in everyone's company, and the mental well-being is really important, because we do know that negativity massively drags performance backwards. So if we get everybody on the positive front foot moving forward, it's really important. So to me, the first thing I'd be doing is looking at performance reviews, but using the data that we've gathered from our systems to understand where our people are strong, where they are weak, but also looking at what our clients are likely to be doing. So I think a blended approach of what all four of us talked about is really important to make sure that we have a really good understanding of our business, but not just our business. When I talk people, I'm talking consultants, back office, clients, candidates, and suppliers, because all of those products need working and mashing together to make sure that you have the perfect product to take to market, and how that then influences the marketplace. And that leads us on to a second question. That's
Howard, before we do that, could I just pick up on a quick couple of points you've made? Because I think a couple of brilliant points there. Firstly, unemployment, we haven't seen the peak, because I believe that will happen once the furlough scheme stops. So none of us should be that surprised to see a spike in unemployment when furlough schemes finish. I think most people will agree with that. The couple of points, one that made Lisa, we were talking about Lisa Kramer last week from Kooth, who was fabulous. Something that popped up in that, I think just worthy of another mention, and that is thinking of your staff benefits. We talked about it. What I was wondering out loud last week about whether we realign and review our benefits as business owners for our people. So, typically recruitment businesses provide a whole range of benefits, which will often include things like trips for winners, nights out and so forth. I wonder whether, given that, budgets aren't limitless, whether a lot of recruitment owners will look at their benefits package and start thinking in terms of providing things like mental health care, for example, a mentor for people, a somebody, as in Lisa's case, a psychologist, that kind of support and service. Because I can tell you, I think that younger people particularly are going to be drawn to businesses that have a modern portfolio of benefits that's different from the pre-COVID level of benefits. And it's something to think hard about, I think, for business owners. Realign your benefits. Consider what people really want going forward. I don't think it's the same as before COVID. I think it's changed, and people are much more aware of the care packages that employers will provide. Your last point about coaching and training, Howard, I think, part and parcel of that review with our people is to understand where the gaps are in terms of their knowledge. We're entering a different market. What type of training, what kind of coaching is going to be necessary for them to be able to take advantage of the new market that's coming in our direction? Sorry to interrupt you.
No, it's all right.
So I'm, as you know, I'm on site today. Part of the work that I'm doing is looking at the EVP for a specific business, and that includes the benefits. The benefits is a small part, but I think a big part of the benefits which people ask for is time off, and some of the more progressive, thought-provoking leaders are, really pushing that time off. So, I think I've mentioned this in one of the webinars in the past. Pushing that up to sort of 35 days makes it quite difficult to lead a business, and it's all based around sort of tenure and everything else. But I think the holidays and time off is quite a big one. And the second bit, which you've just mentioned, which I think is really important, is the training and investment in training. And the second part of what I'm doing today is a training needs analysis. So, how often do we actually, as business leaders, we talk about people quite a bit, but really do a proper training needs analysis to understand what people specifically need? I think they're two really important points you've just mentioned.
I think that if I sort of caveat on both of those parts and maybe help you, Paul, I had a company where what I did was I gave them unlimited holidays. They had to be a certain percentage target, but I gave them unlimited holidays. They could take as many holidays as they want, and there was different rules around it. What I generally found was everyone took less holidays, but because they had the opportunity to take as many holidays as they want, there wasn't this sudden cram around, I've got to take my, you look at, say, coming towards December, I've got to take all my holidays that I haven't taken, etc., etc. That disappeared. We also ran, work the hours that you want at that stage. We found people came into work earlier and stayed later because all of a sudden they were able to do that. It was their choice, and it's not for everybody, but there is a sort of certain feeling that COVID has driven it more towards that line than ever before. Training, I've been doing some boot camps on a Wednesday, which I'll be doing today at 1 o'clock, and I've got a second boot camp starting up in April as well for those of people who haven't signed up to that. And what I said at the start of those training camps is what Ali said. He trained hard so he could fight easy. Where I think recruitment, what we do is we fight hard and train easy. And I think the more we train ourselves to become better at our job, the better we will be. And that means it has a better
100%.
effect on retention of our staff because they feel cared for, but it has a better effect on service levels to our clients and our candidates. And so, yes, would I say, has recruitment fundamentally changed from when I first started in the 90s? The question is probably no. But yes, it's changed 1,000,000% because there's so many different ways of doing it and so many different outlets to actually deliver your recruitment process. So there's lots of things that should be happening all the time about constantly updating and constantly training, which leads very nicely into our second question, which sounds very much similar to the first question, but I want a distinct difference in this question. The second question is, what do you think then would have the most impact on business growth and why? So what would you implement now that would have the most impact on business growth and why? So let's push back to Dave and have Dave in first on that one, because he's been quiet for a moment in time.
It's a distinct answer, but it comes from the same fountain, if you like. And the answer is offer them hope. You as a leader, it's your job to offer hope, remind them of what your purpose is, because that have distinct impact. And I'll go back to not to Jamie, but to Lisa Kramer. And her summary of her 45 minutes was those organizations that are mentally healthy will win bigger over those that just focus on numbers. And yeah, I'm slightly biased because I'm the chair of a teenage mental health charity. So it's something that I have a passion for. But it is something that I think as we've come out of this crisis, as Paul said earlier on, that there's a real focus on there. So what can I do to impact immediately? Well, go back to your people and offer them hope. This is what we're about. This is where we're going. This is how we're going to get there. And this is your part in it. And of course, all the other things, and retaining clients, placing contractors, new services, all of the things absolutely matter because you can't survive without them. But it's the people that are going to implement them. So I would go back to hope. I'd go back to what Lisa was talking about being mentally astute and being aware, and I would impact that. I would have that influence straight away.
So it's interesting when you start to see that, one of the questions we've been asked is, as the market bounced back, what do the panel think are the biggest challenges on hiring new talent? And another one's asked, good recruiters are in massive demand at the moment. What do you think the main drivers are to attract talent alongside money? So it's interesting that you mentioned hope there. As that is going to be the big challenge to attract new people into the recruitment market to deliver the service that we want, how does hope play that as a strategy?
Well, hope is linked into your purpose. And your purpose for the businesses that are on here is different to every other purpose. And if you're after talent and you're after unique talent, and we all know that's going to be tough in the next 12 months to get the right people, your story, your purpose, and the way that you deliver that hope and the way that you deliver that story is what is going to set you apart in the minds of the people that you're interviewing. For very many companies, the only thing that really separates them from some of their competitors is the journey they're on, the purpose they have to get there. And when you're interviewing people, you will see from the candidates that you're talking to, they're looking for something a little bit different. They're looking to hear a slightly different story. The destination may be the same, but just sitting there saying, I want to get a bigger company, I want to sell in a few years, that's not going to get you the people you want. You'll be able to hire people, but will you be able to hire exceptional people? Or will you be able to hire people that you can mold in the way that you want them to be and they really form an excellent part of your team?
What you're saying is the difference between, the least London rattler that goes down every day compared to the Orient Express. There's a huge difference in those two trains, but the journey is the same type scenario. And I think what we're talking about, Paul Sharp and I were with a client on Monday, where we talked about the exact same thing as they start to look to grow their business. He doesn't want to bring experienced recruiters in. He just wants to bring new talent in. And we still had the same conversation that you've got to fight for that talent. Therefore, your mission and your values need to be absolutely aligned and be, when you touch the business, feel the business, they feel and see that mission and value and work from there. So I think that's a great thing to sort of look at and how we implement that. So I'll flip that question to Mr. Jacobs. Mr. Jacobs, as we went through this, what do you think would have the most impact on growth and why?
Okay, thanks, Howard. I mean, I just want to make Paul's point about staff wanting more time off. Come on, they've had a year off. What's all that about? Let's just get on with it now.
A year.
Come on, how much time do you want to give people off?
Get out the 70s, Paul.
Yeah, come on, let's get back to work. Let's make some money, folks.
Okay, I'm
1870.
going to interject here. I'm going to be rude, PJ. I'm going to interject. One thing we learned during COVID, the people that are working 48 minutes a day longer than they work when they're in the office.
I know. It's tongue in cheek. It's tongue in cheek. Not. I'm only joking. So I would say for me, Howard, to answer your question, look, I think where I would want to make the biggest impact now in terms of really getting things moving is getting close to clients. We've talked an awful lot over the last 12 months about timing, getting close to clients, making sure we understand where they're going, what they want from us. We've talked, I think Paul made reference to data earlier, providing people with services beyond just placing people with them. We've talked an enormous amount about getting exclusivity, retained business opportunities from clients, moving away as best we can from contingent recruitment. So for me, this links to my earlier point about getting our own guys in the right space, and certainly about coaching and training, to Paul's point and yours earlier. But this is really now, it has to be, in my view, let's get very, very close to our clients. Let's understand where they're going to be going in the next 6 months to 12 months. Now, what does that require? Well, it requires contact. We need to get in front of people. Now, we all know we've been using it. We're using it right now. Virtual meetings, fine. It's great, actually. Thank God for it. And we know the technology is going to get more and more sophisticated and cheaper to use as time goes on. But let's also be aware that the time is coming fairly soon now where we will be able to actually physically get in front of our clients, our customers. We will actually be able to go and see them, and they'll be comfortable with that. So for me now, I feel, quite aside from the most important thing, which is to make sure our people are aligned with our values, with our purpose, to give them hope, which is Dave's great point, and making sure that we're supporting them in the correct way, coaching and training them. Let's now, and I made a joke earlier, but tongue in cheek, let's start getting on with getting in front of our clients, because ultimately we're all about now moving forward, trying to regain our positioning from pre-COVID, getting back to a position where we can start to rebuild profits and in fact go way beyond where we were before last March. So for me now, there needs to be very distinct actions around our target clients. Who are we going to do? Who are we going to meet? Who can we start to approach to get more retained or exclusive opportunities, warm, hot clients, people that already like us? The old-fashioned upselling, cross-selling opportunities. If you're not working in that interim market space, consider it strongly, because you want that opportunity. If you are, then great. Let's see if we can ring fence our clients. So for me, I'd want to imbue a huge amount of passion and enthusiasm into my guys to be getting out, talking to clients. I'd be setting goals and targets around that to really start to communicate in a way that we've never done before, to quite an intense level over the next, an increasingly intense level over the next 3 to 6 months.
So I'd like to say thank for your tactful start to that conversation.
That's always a pleasure.
Uncle Jobs. What I'd like to also bring out, though, is a question that's come from the clients here on listening in is, when we're talking about getting out to the clients and seeing what the clients are doing and what's going on, one thing is we've talked about quite a lot is how recruiters are viewed. And the question is 360 still the best plan for the future? And we've had lots of conversations about this. I mean, this is our 52nd webinar since lockdown started.
Yep.
On a Wednesday, so it's a year since we started doing these webinars. I haven't baked one. I apologise for that. But what I'm saying, Paul, is we've talked about 360 recruitment quite a lot.
Yep.
When you think talking about going out to clients,
Yep.
give me your view of, is 360 dead? Is it alive and kicking, or is there something different and a better hybrid of the place?
I think it's a brilliant question, and I will say bluntly, I don't think 360 was ever alive. I mean, we delude ourselves that everybody is capable of doing so-called, in inverted commas, 360-degree recruitment. That's not true. It's not only not true of our consultants, it's actually not true of the people that own the businesses. We all have different strengths. And each strength in its own right is valid to the operation of our businesses. The question I would raise here is that some people are very comfortable in business development areas. So communicating with clients, meeting them, influencing them to use our services. Others are great at account management, can nurture, can develop existing business, can develop relationships to a deeper degree. Some people are superb at dealing with candidates, candidate care, looking after them, coaching them through interviews, pre-interviews. Others are great resources or simply brilliant at arranging interviews and so forth. If you crunch it down, if you look at what the average recruitment guy or girl does in a business, you can probably find 30 to 35 units in a 360-degree area. It's impossible to find people, and it's never been possible to find people that can do every one of those elements really, really well. I would say Howard. So my view, sorry to answer your question, is I'm of the opinion that you use people's strengths and you work them, you put those strengths in the areas where they can have the most impact, and you give up trying to push round pegs into round holes. You get people to work in areas where they can be of most benefit to the business and to candidates and clients.
So what we're saying is then, is what we've been saying quite a lot, is that find people's strengths, because if you employ that engage their strengths, they tend to stay longer because they're not having to sort of constantly worry about their weaknesses. Develop those strengths and work from there. But that also means we potentially have to sort of change how we remunerate people to make sure that we're making the right amount of profit from the business, which is a whole different question. Let's flip this question on to Mr. Sharp, because we're sort of quick. The clock's running down very, very quickly on this, as always. So Paul, again, the most impact on business growth and why?
I'm going to have to play this video back. Did Paul Jacobs just say we should stop pushing round pegs in round holes?
I'll have to listen to that again.
I did actually. Well, this isn't just a minute. This isn't just a minute, by the way. I know you caught me out there, so I have to.
Yeah. And there's another one. We're going to have to communicate like we've never communicated before. Well, why didn't you communicate like that before? Probably 2 points for me. I think we've not talked about the business plan and business strategy. We've talked about purpose and vision and values. I think, getting it down, written on a piece of paper, getting it out of people's heads, I think is really important. Setting some really clearly defined targets and understanding what the priorities, I think is definitely key. And Howard, you and I have done quite a bit of that over the last couple of weeks with various people. I think there's two common themes that are coming out. The first, and we talked about this with the guys from Mercury, is just understanding what your technology strategy is, and how can you use technology to free up time. And again, Howard, you and I we talked to somebody about this on Monday. So how can you simplify and automate and use technology? And there's so much technology out there these days. How can you use it to free up time and simplify the process, so you're not manually pushing paper or information from one section to the other? So I think freeing up time and understanding how technology can do that is really important. I know PJ is a massive fan of the online video platforms. Again, a lot of my clients are having really brilliant success through embracing some of those online video platforms. So a little bit there about the technology bit. And the second part for me is, I think the market's going to shift towards the back end of this year. So I think it's around 40% of people are currently, or will be actively looking for a job in the back end of this year. People are in roles they didn't want to be in. They anticipated moving careers earlier. They've had to pivot, so they've gone from catering to driving. There'll be a massive influx in terms of people looking at roles and changing career direction towards the back end of this year. So the best bit for me is around how you're going to really build out your candidate network, and how can marketing help you achieve that, and how can you drive much more traffic back to your website so that you're ultimately getting that traffic into your CRM. So I think we will go back quite quickly to the recruitment agencies that have got the strongest candidate networks being the ones that do particularly well going forward. I think that's really important. Marketing's got a massive part to play in that.
It has. So I know you're pushed for time at the moment, and you're going to be jumping off this webinar very quickly. So just to go on a little sort of side street on this, I've been asked a question, and this is a really interesting question, and I'm going to give my answer before I ask the question. Less than 10% is my answer. Okay. The question is, what percentage of recruitment consultants are using social media effectively? Should you try and force them to do more? And this was by Richard Herring. I think force is a strong word, Richard, by the way.
Well, I think the answer is that I don't think our guys are as well versed in using social media as they could be. I think it's a complicated space. People really, there are very few people that truly understand how to get the most out of social media. So I think back to Paul's point, I think marketing is incredibly important. I think our guys are not aware of the opportunities and the advantages they have if they use LinkedIn or Facebook, for example, correctly. So I think some coaching is needed. I think your point's valid, Howard. I think to put a percentage on it is a difficult one, but I would say it's the minority of people that I speak to that truly grasp how to get the most out of LinkedIn and social media in general terms. But as I say, I think that may come back to pointing a finger at ourselves and saying, are we providing our people with the right level of coaching and training to enable them to truly understand how to take advantage of it?
Sharpie?
Yeah, I'm. You know where I am. This particular business where I'm at, I think are absolutely brilliant at using social media. So I think they do a hell of a lot. They've appointed a marketing manager recently, and even she's shocked at the level of engagement. And she's come from another recruitment agency. She's shocked at the level of engagement here. So it can be achieved, but there's a lot of work to be done around people understanding the purpose and how it can help them in their role. And I think quite often people look for the shortcuts, not understanding things like social media. It's got to be a consistent long game. You can't just dip in and dip out. You've got to be 2 feet in, and you've got to be committed, and you've got to be consistent.
I've just been asked a question by Simon Johnson, which I hope not the panelists, I hope the audience can answer. Simon can't hear anything coming through. Is that him, or is that everybody else? Can everybody else still hear us? If not, Simon, get your finger out your ear, get your wax sorted out, mate. Get your internet sorted out. Moving on then, because I know I say Paul's, but most people can hear us. Most people can hear us. Good. So what would I do? What would I sort of give in, to give to the biggest impact? And I think the biggest impact you can have, and I remember sort of going back to sort of looking at what line could I affect on a P&L? And when you start to look at it from the majority of people in your business, the majority of the people can only affect one line on your P&L, and that's the gross profit line. It's what sales they put through. So to me, the biggest impact I could have on the business is making sure my business is fit for purpose. And that goes into what both Pauls have said, what Dave Pye has said. And to me, that's about having a proper plan to develop your people and to make sure that they are fit for purpose. We always talk about, training and developing our people and making them good at recruitment. What we never think about is how do we get that extra edge? How do we get better at what we're doing? What are we doing to get better? And you used to go to any sporting arena, they're always looking for that, marginal gain. They're looking for that little thing that gives them that marginal edge. And I think if we start to look at those things, then that's when we start to see how our business really starts to move forward. So to me, I'd be looking at my staff, I'd be implementing something around my staff that can give them the confidence and the power to go out there and outperform the competition, because that's what it is. It's a competition to outperform people. But what we've changed and what lockdown has created and what lockdown has changed, it's changed the difference between transactional recruitment and what I would call behavioral recruitment. And what I mean that is most clients hire on skills and then fire on behavior. Transactional is all about the skill level, where behavioral is all about creating relationships and developing relationships. So in your business, I'd be looking at how do you make sure that your business is behaviorally aligned to your mission and your values, and therefore they'll give out your mission and your values to your clients and your candidates. And if that mission and value is welcomed by your candidates and clients, they will want to get on your mission and help drive your business forward. So to me, it's all about the client-facing people in your business and what they're doing, and it's all about you as a leader. You have the biggest impact on them. So what can you give your staff that gives them the hope and the power to actually drive forward and there? So that's the question. So I'm going to finish off with one last question, okay? And this question's coming from Robin Bennett, okay? What senior HR people are looking for from their recruitment providers as hopefully we exit lockdown? What are they looking for? What do you think that either senior HR people or senior buyers of recruitment, what are they looking for from a recruiter?
Okay, so I think that the answer is that, and we said it earlier, and we've been saying it for some months, it's not just about providing great people. This is most definitely about getting close to them to figure out what is of value to them. And Paul made mention of data in previous webinars. We've talked about, for example, D&I data. I think HR are very keen for us to support them in a range of different areas that is not about placing people in jobs. And I think we need to be close enough to understand from them what it is they require from us that will add value to them, to their roles, that also provides us with a level of credibility and kudos that goes beyond just placing people in jobs.
Sharpie, because I know you've got to go.
Yeah, Paul's absolutely spot on for me, and I the fear of repeating myself, but you guys have seen some of the work that I've done with some of the clients that I work with. You know, putting together that slide deck and getting in front of your your clients, and talking about things like diversity and inclusion, talking about the rise of internal referral schemes, talking about, you know, the market, the skills, this hourglass effect that's happening in the labour market, the fact that there's more EU workers leaving the UK now than ever before, but we've now got more non-EU workers coming into the UK than ever before. So talking about more strategic things about what's going on in the labour market from a labour skills and talent perspective, I think is really important. And the last bit I just add in there is intelligence. You know, you talk to your candidates, you can find out what people are doing in other organisations. You know, go and share that information with your top 3 clients and tell them what other people are doing. When you work in-house, the one thing you crave is external data, because you just lose access to it quite quickly. So understanding what other people are doing is really important for me. And on that note, I'm going to have to go, I'm afraid.
Sharpie, thanks very much. We'll speak to you later on. Have a good time in Leeds. It's the best place to be, as well, you know. It's the only place where the sun shines 24/7. It has more sunshine than Sydney, apparently, but that's Sydney in Ireland, not Sydney, Australia. Dave Pye.
Not Sydney, Australia. See you later, guys.
Cheers, Paul.
Dave Pye, your last comment on that question.
Yeah, and very quickly, and not being flippant, I tell you what HR directors are looking for. They're looking for their recruitment consultants and their owners and their managers to ask them, what are you looking for? What can I do to help you in the next 3 months as you bring your people from the HR perspective back together? Do you want intelligence? Do you want D&I? What is it that you want that I can deliver for you? And then you'll find out. And there may be 25 different answers. I don't know the answer. But what they want is to be asked.
I think the question there sort of sums that up in a simple way of reviewing it, is that most HR directors, most buyers of recruitment services see the recruitment agency all as suspect. And they line us all up as a suspect chart and then pick the one that they want to work with. If they actually saw us prospects, we'd get far more beneficial or far more benefit from us, because we're working together. We see most clients as a prospect. They see most recruitment agencies as suspect. So once we get that prospect to prospect sort of analogy, it becomes far better. So I think what they're looking for honesty, they're looking for integrity, they're looking for services that are outside recruitment that will add benefit to them. And I think that's the thing that we start to go back to them. And I think anybody that buys recruitment services, whether they be HR, C-suite, whatever it be, the job is, how do we make their job easier? How do we make their life easier? How do we expedite the recruitment process whilst reducing the overall cost of recruitment? And I keep using that phrase, the overall cost of recruitment, not our fee, because you can start to charge a higher fee if you can start to show true benefit to the client from both a functional point of view and a financial point of view. So that's it, ladies and gents. Thank you very much for this week. It's been a very interesting conversation, I hope. It's certainly interesting listening to whatever. It's very rare that all 4 of us get together and have that type of conversation. We have lots of conversations, but it's very rare we bring those things together. Next week, we're going to be, again, challenging the recruitment market with what's going on in the recruitment market. So please join us next week. Hope you enjoy the weather. The weather's looking lovely for today and tomorrow. Unfortunately, it's not looking great for Easter, but there's nothing new there. So that just leaves us to say thanks very much, guys. Much appreciated. And we'll see you all next week.
Bye, everybody.
Cheers, folks. Have a good week.